Late on the evening of February 8, 2017, in Grove City, Ohio, 21-year-old Ohio State University student Reagan Delaney was finishing her shift at a local eatery, the Bodie Cafe. After a long night of serving tables, she packed up her belongings and stepped outside, just as she had done countless times before. Roughly 1:00 p.m., Reagan began her short walk to the car parked behind the restaurant, a routine she had performed so many evenings that it had almost become automatic, a small ritual. Followed nearly every shift, she sent a quick text to her family in Florida to reassure them she had returned. "Home safely, I'm home," she would write a brief but comforting message to those thousands of miles away. That night, however, that text never appeared. By 10:30, her younger sister, Mackenzie, sent a message which was delivered, but no reply came. Their father, Toby, called repeatedly, leaving messages that went unanswered for hours. Reagan's phone rang without response. Then in the early morning, around 2:00 a.m., the line abruptly went dead. The following morning, Reagan did not attend her lecture. Her dorm room was tidy, her belongings neatly arranged, but she was nowhere to be found. Hours later, law enforcement received a tip. A passerby reported discovering the body of a young woman near Scioto Grove Park. The body was uncovered in the snow with no identification, no clothing, and no phone. The only clues to her identity were a small circular tattoo and a delicate necklace. When police inquired with Reagan's roommates, they immediately recognized the tattoo. Panic set in. It was at that moment they realized that Reagan hadn't merely vanished, she had been abducted. The investigation revealed the terrifying sequence of that night. Reagan had been forced from one ATM to another, coerced to withdraw money, and subjected to unimaginable terror in the final hours of her life, pleading desperately for the chance to survive. Before continuing with the story, I'd like to pause and give the audience a moment to engage. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world, type your city and the local time in the comments. Grove City, Ohio is a town with deep roots. Once primarily agricultural, it has grown into a welcoming community that balances the serenity of small-town life with access to modern amenities. Nature enthusiasts are drawn to nearby state parks for hiking, kayaking, and recreational activities like paintball. In autumn, families flock to the pumpkin patches following traditions that have been preserved for generations. Just a short drive away lies Ohio State University, a sprawling campus with over 60,000 students. Among them, in 2017, was Reagan, a psychology major with a focused ambition. Reagan's family had relocated to Florida for work, but she chose to stay behind in Columbus to pursue her studies at OSU, the only university she had ever applied to. Her father remembered taking her to a football game as a child, a visit that solidified her lifelong dream of attending the school. She was accepted, just as she had predicted, and immersed herself in student life with vigor. 21, Reagan balanced her studies, work, and family connections with precision. Her bond with her parents and sister was strong. They spoke multiple times a day. Her mother, Lisa, often remarked that Reagan had always been a whirlwind of energy, compassionate and observant of those often overlooked by others. Even as a child, Reagan would rescue insects from the road, unwilling to let any living creature suffer. Reagan was not only compassionate but also socially vibrant. She participated in church mission trips, excelled in varsity tennis and lacrosse, and maintained close friendships with her roommates, Jackie Madison, Kirsten, and Stephanie, who quickly became like family after being randomly assigned to live together. However, in the weeks leading up to February 8th, Reagan had experienced personal challenges. She had recently ended a relationship with her boyfriend Jake, a mutual decision driven by a desire to focus on academics. Despite the breakup, they remained close friends. Reagan's life, while busy, was filled with excitement and anticipation, particularly as graduation approached. On that fateful evening, Reagan completed her shift and walked toward her car parked in the familiar spot behind the Bodie Cafe. She planned, as always, to send her nightly text confirming her safe returned, but that simple message never came. Her family grew increasingly anxious as hours passed without communication. Texts and calls went unanswered, and by 2:00 a.m., the line had gone silent. The following morning, Reagan's absence from class prompted concern among friends and faculty alike. Her dorm room, orderly as ever, offered no clues, heightening the alarm. Reagan's roommates immediately began reaching out to others, hoping someone had seen Erwin. The university confirmed she had missed class. Her mother tried to file a missing persons report but was initially told she could not, as the last confirmed sighting was from Reagan's co-workers. The roommates contacted the restaurant, confirming that Reagan had indeed left after her shift. Her car was gone, suggesting she had driven off, yet no one knew her whereabouts. Only then was a missing person report formally filed around noon. A distressed passerby reported finding the body of a young woman at Scioto. Grove Metro Park police quickly confirmed the body had no identification, no clothing, and no small tattoo and necklace remained. When questioned, Reagan's roommates identified the tattoo, confirming the horrifying truth. Reagan had been murdered, had no emergency cooling. The discovery sent shockwaves through the OSU community, and the town of Grove City news crews quickly descended on the scene. And students began speculating about what could have happened as authorities pieced together the timeline. It became chillingly clear that Reagan's disappearance was not random. This was a deliberate act of abduction and violence. Initially, investigators worked to reconstruct the hours after Reagan left the restaurant. Security cameras captured fleeting glimpses of her as she walked to her car, but there was no sign of anyone trailing her until her vehicle was later located on a residential street. Partially charred cigarette burns and a strong smell of gasoline suggested an attempted arson, which had fortunately failed, leaving critical evidence behind. Among the evidence were cigarette butts, a gas can, and several ATM receipts, all collected for forensic analysis. The receipts revealed a terrifying sequence: large withdrawal attempts at multiple ATMs, most of which were declined, except for a single $60 withdrawal. Investigators inferred that Reagan had been forced to drive to these ATMs under duress. DNA testing on the cigarette butts returned an almost immediate match to a known offender in the police database: 29-year-old Brian Lee Goldsby. Brian's criminal record was extensive and disturbing since adolescence. He had been convicted of sexual assaults and violent crimes, including the kidnapping of a pregnant woman and her young child. He had previously been sentenced for robbery and attempted rape, but had been released early and placed in supervised transitional housing, despite being considered high risk. Supervision had been inadequate, and his ankle monitor data, which could have linked him to prior assaults, had not been properly monitored. As investigators dug deeper, they connected a string of robberies and attacks on women in the weeks prior to Reagan's murder directly to Brian's CCTV footage corroborated the ATM withdrawals, and the gas can in Reagan's car matched the one he had purchased days earlier. The forensic evidence was overwhelming: DNA at the scene, security footage, and witness statements all pointed to him. Brian was arrested early on February 11th. During interrogation, he initially denied involvement in Reagan's death, admitting only to forcing her into her car for the robbery. Over the course of hours, detectives challenged inconsistencies in his story, eventually securing confessions to multiple crimes, including kidnapping, sexual assault, and ultimately murder. He provided details that only the perpetrator could know: the location of Reagan's clothing, the disposal of the weapon, and the location of her phone. The crime was methodical and terrifying. After abducting Reagan, he forced her to drive to several ATMs. She pleaded for her life at each stop, begging to be allowed to survive. In the early hours of February 9th, he drove her to Scioto Grove Metro Park, compelled her to remove her clothes, and shot her execution style in a cold, dark field. Afterwards, he fled using her car, attempted to create an alibi, and tried to destroy evidence. But the meticulous collection of forensic data ensured he could not evade justice. The community mourned deeply. Friends, family, and fellow students were left grappling with the incomprehensible loss. Social media erupted with tributes and messages of grief. Jake, Reagan's ex-boyfriend, organized a fundraiser in her memory, raising nearly $100,000 to establish a scholarship at Ohio State University, ensuring that Reagan's legacy would benefit future students. In the courtroom, the evidence was presented in painstaking detail. Jurors were shown the ATM locations, the alley where the assault took place, and the park where Reagan's body had been found. Witnesses included roommates, forensic experts, and first responders. Security footage, DNA evidence, and Brian's own confessions formed an airtight case. The defense focused on mitigating circumstances, highlighting Brian's troubled upbringing, history of abuse, and addiction struggles. They argued he lacked the sophistication to plan such a violent crime. However, the prosecution demonstrated that intelligence or planning ability was irrelevant. The evidence showed deliberate, repeated actions, and premeditation ankle monitor data, CCTV recordings, and forensics all painted a clear picture of his movements and intentions. Brian Goldsby was ultimately convicted on all counts, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, rape, and armed robbery. He received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, along with an additional 66 years for prior assaults and robberies. The sentencing reflected the severity and premeditated nature of his crimes, even after his incarceration. The case highlighted systemic failures. Brian had repeatedly violated the terms of his supervision, yet no timely interventions occurred. The Reagan-Delaney-Towes Law, passed in Ohio in 2019, addressed these gaps, allowing courts to impose extended sentences and ensuring stricter monitoring for high offenders. The law emphasized proper use of electronic monitoring and reinforced accountability for agencies supervising convicted felons. In memory of Reagan, the community established scholarships, self-defense programs, and a dedicated memorial at Scioto Grove Metro Park named Tranquility Garden. The garden includes natural features and symbolic elements representing Reagan's life, her favorite color, 5 buckeye trees in honor of her time at OSU, and a serene water feature reflecting her astrological sign. Her family continued to honor her legacy through advocacy and education, promoting safety and awareness for students and the community. The scholarships provided by the Memorial Foundation continue to support Ohio State students, covering tuition and housing, while self-defense classes empower women to protect themselves in similar situations. Reagan's life, though tragically cut short, left a lasting impact. Friends described her as compassionate, energetic, and altruistic, someone who consistently put others first. Her mother reflected that, even in the face of unimaginable loss, the essence of love and resilience endures. Though the final hours of her life were horrifying, Reagan's story has become a catalyst for change, inspiring reforms in criminal supervision, campus safety, and community awareness. Her memory lives on through the lives she touched, the scholarships that continue to support education, and the spaces created for reflection and healing. From the moment she left the Bodie Calf that night to the nationwide attention her case received, Reagan's story illustrates the profound consequences of systemic failures and the enduring importance of vigilance, compassion, and justice. Her life, her ambition, and her unwavering empathy continue to inspire, ensuring that, while she may be gone, her legacy remains indelible.